1980, White Motor Company filed for bankruptcy with over $1 billion in debt. This wasn't a company that failed because they couldn't build trucks. Their vehicles had carried soldiers through World War II and earned a reputation for reliability that money couldn't buy. But somewhere along the way, the engineers who built America's toughest machines were replaced by executives who thought they knew better. What happened next would destroy one of the most respected names in American trucking and serve as a warning about what happens when greed takes the wheel. On October 6, 1900, Roland White secured a patent for a new kind of flash boiler that changed everything. Instead of relying on bulky, water-heavy drums like other steam cars, his compact design built pressure quickly and safely, finally making steam cars a practical option for everyday drivers. The White steamer that emerged could operate quietly and smoothly while gasoline cars shook violently and filled the air with noise and smoke. In 1905, a racing version of the White steamer nicknamed Whistling Billy blazed around New York's Morris Park track at nearly 74 miles an hour, shattering records and proving the capability of American engineers. White steamers rose to prominence in the early 20th century, with President William Howard Taft later establishing the first official White House automobile fleet in 1909, featuring a White steamer in the presidential garage. But Roland White understood that the future lay in commercial vehicles that could work for a living. By the end of World War I, White made a move that stunned the industry. While Ford was flooding America with cheap cars, White abandoned the passenger market completely. They had discovered something during the war that would define their future. Their trucks worked when everything else failed. During the Great War, White's Standard Class A trucks became the workhorses of the U.S. Army, hauling supplies through mud and shellfire. Thousands came off the line, each one a rolling ad for American craftsmanship. White trucks dominated cross-country freight routes because they could handle punishment that destroyed other brands. Their engineers developed shaft drive systems that eliminated troublesome chains, and their 6-cylinder engines delivered more power and smoother operation than competitors. The company's dealer network, inherited from the sewing machine business, gave them service coverage from New York to California. During the 1930s, White trucks earned their reputation hauling freight through the Great Depression when only the toughest equipment survived. The Model 706 became a favorite for long-haul operators, its inline-6 engine producing around 140 horsepower and delivering the reliability truckers counted on to stay profitable. When World War II erupted, White transformed into a military machine builder. The company delivered over 48,000 military vehicles during the war, ranking 54th among all U.S. suppliers by total defense contract value. Among these were over 11,400 M3A1 Scout cars, which played a crucial role in Allied reconnaissance operations, thanks to their full-time four-wheel drive and ability to traverse terrain that would stop conventional vehicles. The M3A1's design was revolutionary for its time. The hull was welded rather than riveted, providing better protection and structural integrity. The transfer case allowed seamless switching between two-wheel and four-wheel drive, essential for reconnaissance missions that required both speed on roads and traction in mud. The M16 Meat Chopper half-track, mounting 4.50 caliber machine guns, proved deadly against both aircraft and ground targets from Normandy to the Battle of the Bulge. The quad-mount system could deliver 2,400 rounds per minute of sustained fire, creating a wall of lead that could stop infantry attacks and bring down low-flying aircraft. White became the first truck manufacturer to win the Army-Navy E Award in 1942, recognizing their consistent ability to meet military specifications under extreme pressure. More than 11,000 M3A1 Scout cars were shipped overseas through the Lend-Lease program, spreading the White name across nearly every Allied front. By 1945, White Motor Company stood at the pinnacle of American industrial achievement. Their trucks had carried the nation through depression and war, earning a reputation for reliability that money couldn't buy. But success was about to become more dangerous than failure. The transformation began in Cleveland boardrooms, where executives looked at White's success and saw opportunity for something bigger. Robert Fagger Black, who took control in the early 1950s, understood that growth meant acquisition. In 1951, White purchased Sterling Trucks, strengthening their severe duty market position. Sterling had been building trucks since 1907, specializing in heavy-duty applications that required maximum durability. The acquisition made strategic sense. Sterling's customers needed the same reliability that White had always delivered. The Autocar Company acquisition in 1953 brought one of the most respected names in heavy-duty trucking. Autocar had been building trucks since 1899, with a legendary reputation among construction and logging companies. Their specialty was custom-built trucks for applications where standard vehicles couldn't survive. The acquisition pace accelerated through the 1950s. Rio Motor Car Company joined in 1957, bringing medium-duty expertise. Diamond T followed in 1958, adding their reputation for oilfield applications. By 1967, White had merged Diamond T and Rio into Diamond Rio division. By the late 1960s, White manufactured trucks under multiple brand names: White, Autocar, Diamond Rio, and Western Star. Revenue exploded from $130 million in 1950 to $770 million in 1967, almost a six-fold increase. But Cleveland executives weren't satisfied with dominating just trucks. They saw opportunities everywhere. Agricultural machinery acquisitions began with Oliver Corporation in 1960, followed by Cockshut Farm Equipment in 1962 and Minneapolis Moline in 1963. The Hercules Engine Division acquisition in 1966 strengthened engine manufacturing capabilities. Then came 1968 and the acquisition that would destroy everything. White purchased Euclid Inc. from General Motors for $24 million after an antitrust suit forced GM to sell. This brought White into off-highway earth-moving equipment with Euclid's $49 million in annual sales and a product line that included massive mining trucks and construction equipment. The Euclid acquisition looked brilliant on paper. Euclid built some of the largest trucks in the world, including 200-ton mining haulers that worked in copper mines and coal operations across the globe. Their engineering expertise in heavy-duty off-highway applications seemed like a natural extension of White's trucking knowledge. By the mid-1960s, White had the most profitable years in its history, posting $32 million in net income in 1966, the company's all-time high. The White name appeared on everything from medium-duty delivery trucks to 200-ton mining haulers. They ranked among the top 100 defense contractors during the Vietnam War. But behind these impressive numbers, fundamental problems were growing. Each acquisition brought new debt, complexity, and management challenges that Cleveland executives were unprepared to handle. Short-term debt had soared above $300 million by 1970, over twice their annual sales. The engineering culture that had made White great was being diluted by financial pressures and corporate politics that valued growth over quality. White's core truck market share was quietly slipping to competitors like Ford and GM, who could offer complete vehicle solutions. The company was simultaneously trying to compete in heavy trucks, agricultural tractors, construction equipment, and off-highway mining vehicles, each requiring different engineering expertise, manufacturing processes, and market knowledge that stretched resources beyond the breaking point. By 1970, White's acquisitions were crushing the company. The Euclid purchase brought massive debt, complex manufacturing challenges, and a business model that White's management didn't understand. Manufacturing costs were escalating across all divisions as White tried to maintain production facilities for products that shared few common components. Then came October 1973 and the Arab oil embargo. Oil prices jumped from $2 to $11 per barrel overnight, while diesel fuel costs soared from 27 cents to 47 cents per gallon. The trucking industry was devastated as freight rates couldn't keep pace with fuel costs. White's customer base, independent truckers and small fleets, simply stopped buying new equipment. The agricultural equipment market collapsed simultaneously as farm income declined. Construction equipment sales plummeted as building projects were canceled, and mining operations reduced production. The Euclid division became a massive drain on resources as demand for mining equipment evaporated. New emissions and fuel efficiency rules introduced in the mid-1970s forced costly redesigns throughout White's truck and equipment lines. These changes required massive investment that White couldn't afford while servicing existing debt. Semen Bunky Knudsen took control in 1971, orchestrating what looked like a comeback. Sales topped $1.18 billion in 1973, and White posted $21 million in profit. But this resurgence was built on borrowed time and money. White was financing operations with short-term debt that required constant refinancing. White's market share in heavy trucks collapsed from 20% in the 1960s to just 6.2% in the first 7 months of 1980. Competitors like Freightliner, Peterbilt, and Kenworth were capturing customers with more fuel-efficient designs and better dealer support. Manufacturing costs spiraled out of control as White tried to maintain production across too many product lines with insufficient volume to achieve economies of scale. Quality problems emerged as cost-cutting compromised the engineering standards that had built White's reputation. Warranty claims increased as corners were cut in manufacturing. The 1980 recession delivered the final blow. Interest rates soared above 20%, making it impossible to refinance the short-term debt that had financed their acquisitions. Credit lines that had sustained operations for years were suddenly unavailable as banks recognized the company's deteriorating condition. White reported a staggering $46.8 million loss on sales of $524.3 million during the first half of 1980. The company that had once generated massive profits was now losing money faster than they could borrow it, and lenders were no longer willing to extend credit to an obviously failing enterprise. Cash flow problems became critical as suppliers demanded payment in advance and customers delayed purchases. The company that had once commanded respect throughout the industry was now viewed as a risky partner that might not survive to honor warranties or provide parts support. On September 4, 1980, White Motor Company filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, listing approximately $1 billion in unsecured debt. The company that had started as a precision-driven manufacturer had become a cautionary tale about corporate greed and financial overreach. The dismantling began immediately as creditors and buyers circled the wreckage. In 1981, AB Volvo of Sweden grabbed the biggest prize, White's entire U.S. truck manufacturing operations for $75 million, significantly below book value. The deal included plants in Dublin, Virginia, Ogden, Utah, and Orville, Ohio, plus parts and distribution facilities. The Autocar brand, with its legendary reputation for severe-duty applications, became part of the Volvo purchase. Volvo brought not just financial resources, but also advanced engineering capabilities and a global perspective that White had lacked during its final years. Western Star was purchased by Bow Valley Resource Services and Nova Corporation, two Calgary-based energy companies who bought the Canadian operations and Kelowna, British Columbia plant. The Western Star brand had always focused on custom-built trucks for specialized applications, and the Canadian buyers understood that this market required different approaches than mass production. The farm equipment division had already been sold to TIC Investment Corp. In 1979. Euclid was later divested to specialized earth-moving manufacturers and eventually became part of the Terex organization, where its legacy continued under new management. Volvo's transformation of White's operations into Volvo Trucks North America proved the underlying engineering capabilities had never been the problem. Under Swedish ownership with adequate financial resources, the plants began producing trucks that met Volvo's global quality standards while serving the North American market. Western Star thrived under Canadian ownership, eventually becoming part of Daimler's truck empire. The most dramatic resurrection belongs to Autocar, re-established as an independent company in 2001, focusing exclusively on severe-duty vocational trucks. Today, Autocar trucks still roll off assembly lines in Hagerstown, Indiana, carrying the engineering DNA that made White great. The company builds custom trucks for refuse collection, construction, and other demanding applications where failure isn't an option. Exactly the market philosophy that had made White successful. Volvo's North American division continues building on White's manufacturing footprint, producing trucks for the same customers who once bought White vehicles. Even Freightliner traces part of its success to the distribution partnership with White that lasted from 1951 to 1977. The numbers tell the story of what survived. Volvo's North American truck operations now generate $10 to $12 billion in annual revenue, a scale built on White's former plants. The Dublin, Virginia plant, that once built M3A1 Scout cars for World War II, now manufactures Volvo VNL trucks, using the same precision manufacturing principles that Roland White established over a century ago. The original Cleveland facilities established by Roland White ceased regular truck production shortly before the company's 1981 sale to Volvo, closing out nearly 9 decades of local manufacturing legacy. The last White truck rolled off the line in 1981, but Autocar and Western Star still carry the legacy of unmatched engineering precision that once defined a company that chose craftsmanship over profit until the day it didn't.